Well, SABC News reporter Khayelihle Khumalo is currently at the Russian embassy in Pretoria. He's been watching the developments in Ukraine keenly. In a moment, he will be talking to a representative from the embassy. Kaya, I don't know if the representative has joined you already, but what do you have for us this morning?
Oh, that's right, Desiree. So we're right inside the diplomatic mission of the Russian Federation. So there's a great deal of anticipation ahead of the peace talks that will be held between Ukraine and Belarus. And of course, these are Russian neighbors as well. And also we've seen the calls around the cessation of hostilities as the conflict reaches day 5. But Desiree, now we're joined by Alexander. He's a press attaché here in the embassy. So, Alexander, thank you so much indeed for your time. I suppose a very first question is, it's day 5 now. You call it a special military operation, but in the West, they call it invasion. So far, how do you describe the operation?
So first of all, I insist on calling this a special military operation. This is not an invasion, and its goal is not to occupy Ukraine. The goals are to denazify Ukraine and to demilitarize Ukraine. So this is not an invasion, I stress it. So the operation is still underway, but well, there are procedures of peace talks going like in parallel. Well, it's good that diplomacy is also on table. Well, for Russia, diplomacy is always on table. So the operation is still going with the objectives I just described.
And just once again, Alexander, what do you make of the concerns around casualties? You know, the number keeps rising. It's almost 300 or so now, and others are talking about approaching institutions like International Criminal Court. As Russian Federation, what do you make of those calls?
Well, any casualties is a tragedy, and the more the conflict drags on, unfortunately, it will bring casualties. But I wanted to stress that Russia commenced this special operation not because Russia wanted to, it's because Russia was forced to do that. Because for 8 years, the West have been turning a blind eye on the obvious rise of neo-Nazism in Ukraine and violation of the rights of Russian speakers in Ukraine or other ethnic minorities in Ukraine, and for the people in Donbass who have been bombarded by the Kiev regime and punishers for 8 years. A lot of casualties were caused to Donbass region, including women, children, and elderly people. And Russia isn't intervened not to start the war, but to prevent a larger war in Europe, including, well, let's not even think of the apocalyptic scenario, but nuclear war, because the Kiev regime announced in recent days that it wanted to, before the operation began, that it wanted to develop nuclear weapons. Well, neo-Nazis with nuclear weapons, this is a disaster for the entire world. And yes, the West keep providing the Kiev regime with weapons, thus prolonging the war, thus instigating the war further. So Russia's objective is to complete the operation as soon as possible to prevent any more casualties. And I wanted to stress that maybe there's a fake, distorted information that Russia is shooting at civilians. No, it is not. It is fake, rest assured. It's false information because the objectives of the targets of Russian attacks are military infrastructure exclusively. We're not attacking the cities, not attacking the civilians. On the contrary, the Ukrainian neo-Nazis and ultranationalists, they hide in the cities. They deploy the equipment, the military equipment in the cities. So basically using the terrorist tactics of hiding behind their own population as human shields, unfortunately.
Now let's go back to the critical issue behind the very unprecedented amount of sanctions. Your airspace, where your aircraft will not be allowed to land in the EU airspace, some of the military banks that have been targeted, so many parties. How is Russia going to survive? As much as you do have your ally like China that has shown solidarity with the lifting of the restrictions around the wheat production, but how is the Russian economy going to survive the very sweeping sanctions that you've seen?
Well, I think that this question is better be addressed to the Russian government. Well, I'm sure we have a plan. because, well, all the West has been doing lately is introducing sanctions on basically any basis against Russia. So I wanted to say that these sanctions are not for the benefit of Europe, not for the benefit of Russia, not for the benefit of the entire world, because it will have the world is globalized now, and it's going to have the global consequences, negative global consequences. Russia didn't start this. So the West has chosen this path of confrontation. So it's not that we want to confront the West and want to endure sanctions, but we have to, because the West, well, just turns a deaf ear and blind eye on Russia's concerns on security matters, on situation in Ukraine, on humanitarian crisis and literal genocide of people in Donbass. Unfortunately, this is what happens in the Western elites nowadays. So we'll have to manage somehow.
Is the nuclear deterrence forces still on high alert?
I'm not sure if I can comment on this comprehensively. I'm not representing Russian Ministry of Defense. So, no, I'm sorry, I can't comment on this.
And just once again, Alex, what do you say to countries like South Africa, your India, your BRICS partners? For example, here in South Africa, there has been a bit of concern about flip-flopping, whether we're calling for the withdrawal of forces, whether we're calling for the United Nations Security Council to lead in terms of making sure that peace is maintained and stability returns in so many cities in Ukraine where we've seen so many attacks. But what do you say to your BRICS partners in the midst of this critical time, in the midst of a very unprecedented period, at least since World War II?
Well, I can say that desire for peace is natural for human beings, for all the countries. We all desire for peace. This is understandable, and we fully support that in Russia, because ordinary Russians, Russian leadership, Russians in general, we also were urged for peace. But and I think that our partners and friends all around the globe want for peace as well. So I'm not going to come up with recipes on how our BRICS partners or other countries should behave, because these are sovereign states, we understand, and we hear the position of other countries, so there will be no instructions whatsoever. So we proceed from understanding that South Africans can decide for themselves how to react and what to make of the current events. So it's entirely up to every country to decide what to do and how to react.
All right, Alexander, thank you so much indeed for your time. So Desiree, of course, he is a press attaché here at the Russian Federation diplomatic mission right here in South Africa. With that, back to you in studio.